First time I've been able to speak on a microphone, so it sounds quite strange. I'll have to get used to this. I just want to say hello to everybody, but I think it's, first of all, is just to explain that we've got the interpreter here, and I can sign, I am an interpreter, but I can't do both, obviously, because they're both different languages, English and obviously sign language, so if someone thinks somewhat confused about why I'm not signing, it's because obviously it's in a different language, isn't it? Again, hello everybody, it's lovely to see you all. I just wanted to explain first of all about Tony Kershaw. She was due to come today. She's the manager of Customer First. She's the Customer Access Manager. And she said she's really sorry, but she's sick today. However, we had a meeting last week, and it's just really to explain about Horton Street Customer First. Well, what happens is we're working together with Customer First because we all work with the council services. So Tony was going to talk about opening of Horton Street. And obviously opened the new revamped Horton Street was opened at the end of January, or beginning, sorry I can't remember, it's January anyway. And it opens now 10 o'clock till 4, but there has been some changes, and I don't know if anyone's been in. I think some deaf people have been in since it's opened. So they provide services for like the homeless prevention team, also the benefits DWP. So they're working with different organisations and bringing them in to Horton Street, like Better Living and Together Housing. They do also victim support. Some of you deaf customers will be familiar with the Blue Badge, council tax, housing benefit, free school dinners, just things like that. Sorry, someone's phone's going off. Yeah, okay. So that's all based at Horton Street. It starts from, it opens to the customers 10 o'clock till 4, but they do a lot of work behind the scenes. So just because it's open to customers 10 till 4, the customer service advisors may open up like at 8 o'clock and work before the doors actually open. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Tony was going to talk about as well the compliments and complaints procedure for the council. And it works together with sign language interpreting. So what happens is when you make a complaint or you make a compliment and you're happy with a service. So for example, you could be happy with an interpreter that you've worked with and you want that same interpreter for the next appointment, then that's a compliment, you know, and we can take that on board. If we don't know that, we can't provide it. But the same goes for a complaint. So we always do it for council services. If you're unhappy, then you contact the sign language service first. We'll deal with it if we can, but if you're still unhappy with the response, there is a process where you contact, they've got like an email that you can contact. In terms of, you might not necessarily want me to be the interpreter, that's absolutely fine. So what Tony will do then, she'll bring in a freelance interpreter, somebody independent that you can speak to independently. So there are processes, and if you want the email address, you're very welcome to do that, because we always obviously still need feedback, and we need to make sure that we're serving you in a way that you're happy with. One thing I can say is about, since COVID, there's been a lot of changes. a lot of positive changes, really, in the sense that when all the services closed down in terms of, there was a big panic, we started to use a lot more of the technology, and it was something that a lot of people were scared of. So what was happening was, we were finding that we were providing the services really quickly. So a deaf person would have an issue, and sometimes deaf people don't know where to go. So they'll contact me or Faith and say, I've got this problem, what can I do about it? Then we can signpost the service. So it could be like, maybe you've got a problem with your finances, you're worried, you're struggling. Then I go, oh, okay, we have good, the citizen advice. So we can contact citizen advice and set an appointment for them to help you. So that's one of the positives that have happened since COVID. I know there's been lots of difficulties and lots of suffering, whereas many deaf and hearing people have been in fear and have been worried about going out, and they've struggled. But I think now it's sort of, since the masks have been taken away, because that was a huge barrier, especially for deaf people going into hospitals and also going into GP services. But I don't want to digress on that. But I also wanted to tell you, from COVID, there was a really major shift about sign language service working with customer first. So deaf people needed a service, and I had direct contact with the service support team, the officers, and I would say, well, deaf people can't phone. Would you be able to assist? And the working relationship started to flourish and grow. So deaf people were sort of almost like first in the queue, but they're not. But the service was there for them. So that was a really big improvement. So what I might also do is, if I give examples about the services, and you go, oh, I think Pauline's talking about me, I won't give any names, it would just be examples, because obviously everything's kept confidential. But in order for us to understand, I might have to do that, just give it those examples. I think Faith was going to talk about access and the barriers that we've had. Faith, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to explain?
Yeah, should we explain briefly?
I work with Pauline at the interpreting service, so some of you are familiar with me, you know, so I'm familiar with some of the faces that are here today. I've just come back from holiday, so please be patient with me, I'm just trying to get into work mode. Yeah, some people have difficulty and things don't run smoothly accessing various services. I'm going to give an example. Going to the GP, you know, people trying to call the GP and telephone the GP. So, you know, we have to say, you know, we're explaining about the services that are available. And there are still barriers in place. So between us, we try and support this service for the deaf community, and we try our best to make sure that the service runs smoothly.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you. Yeah, just adding on to what Faith had said, a lot of it's the background work that you don't see, and it's always, it's every single day bringing deaf awareness to services, whether it's the GP services, the receptionist, whether it's just different organisations. They always think that deaf people are able to write English and to access it. And some deaf people have a good level of English, but it's always a huge barrier. They say, how, why? They're born in Britain. Do they not understand English? But I have to always explain to them British Sign Language is a second language. So we've worked a lot. So a lot of it is, when you give us a request as service users, we take that on board and we do our very best to contact the services, but a lot of the times it's like a tennis, playing tennis, back and forth, just giving them information, and it's never a frustration. It's always, a lot of people have never met deaf people before or don't understand about the culture and the community. So I just want to really explain that to you, because you may send a text in the morning and I will respond, and Faith will say, we've acknowledged that, but it could take all day to actually get anywhere with that particular booking in order for them to authorise it, and then to give you that reassurance that we've booked an interpreter and here's the name of the interpreter. I also want just to explain about the services that we are working with. We have Customer First, and then we have Gateway to Care. Gateway to Care is like for social services, you know, your different social services departments, home visits by social workers. Citizen Advice is based at Horton Street, but we organise it with Harrison Road. The reason being is that we have the manager that we have a good relationship with. So anything that a deaf person needs or requests, we go to them with it, and they smooth out the barriers and the pathways to make sure that we have the right provision or advisor for that particular appointment. It could be applying for PIP, applying for low-income funds, applications for if you need glasses, extra support with that, because a lot of people are on like lower income. For those who are applying for citizenship cards. So also together housing, so a deaf person may have a problem with repairs, or struggling with the rent, or any issues like that, or it could be any housing benefit. A deaf person would contact us with that, so we can help with that. When we had COVID and we had the lockdown, what we were finding was, when we were phoning like dentists, or GP services, or opticians, the queue system, we could have been waiting for about an hour on the phone to get through, to actually speak to somebody, to make an appointment. And one particular dentist, there was a huge barrier and they would not let us access it. And it was so disheartening, because even though I explained to them over and over again, they were very, very frightened of data protection and breaking the rules. So when people make the stance like that, it's not that they're being awkward, it's because they're scared. They're scared to break the law. So what we had to do is we contacted Disability Partnership, and they really helped. They contacted the dentist, and they explained the situation and the barriers, and they managed to get through. And we managed to get the deaf people, the appointment for the deaf person. That's one of the massive advantages of having that support from Disability Partnership. We also help with the translations of documents like newsletters for young deaf people, the families, the children going to schools. They need translation of letters or newsletters. The biggest barrier since COVID is a lot of things are online. You have to do things online, like book. Say, for example, holidays or applying for different, you know now, don't you? So one particular situation arose where there has been a number when a deaf person will come up to me and say, I need to do this online. I'm like, how? How can I help this deaf person? So I've had to do a lot of fishing around, and one particular one was HM Revenue for a tax rebate. So I got contact to the local library and asked them if they could assist with me being there as the interpreter, because I also have to be careful, because it can't come from me one-to-one. It has to be a third party to translate it, and it worked out really well. So there might be situations where I don't know how to help you, but I'll ask other people how to help and assist in that situation, because it's always a barrier. I'm not deaf, you are, and every single day there's always barriers and issues, and I try my best, but like I said, I'm not deaf, so I get examples of your frustration and your upsets, and trying to smooth the path to make the services accessible for you. But sometimes I'm met by myself, my barriers. So a huge benefit as well is that primary care, which is your GP services. So there's a big change there. Like back in the day, I'll say it as an old way, but back, I don't know, I think it's post-COVID, that when you used to phone up, like say 8 o'clock in the morning, then you'd go first come, first serve. Well, the GP services are now are assessing. They make an assessment first. What's your problem? Are you in pain? Describe your pain. And then they use that, or you even send photos. So obviously, it's first come, first. It isn't first come, first serve. It's an assessment of your medical needs. So what was happening was they were sending deaf people the patch system, PATCH, which is basically what's your problem, and you type it in online and you explain, I've got pain in my leg, it's throbbing, I've not been able to sleep, and here's a photo, but it demands a good level of English description. Also, deaf people need an interpreter as well. So I've managed to work with PCT and have that dropped and explain the reason why, that it's not suitable for deaf people, because one, they need an interpreter, and two, how do deaf people describe their issues and their pain. A lot of deaf people have contacted me and will do sign video, and then they can explain their symptoms. Then I make a phone call to the GP surgeries, and usually the appointment is, they then establish the appointment, the receptionist. I just wanted to let you know what goes on in the background. And then Okay, also it could be that maybe a deaf person has an issue with their prescription, and the GP has to liaise with the pharmacy, the chemist, and they send the prescription over. But what's happening now, I don't know if it's due to COVID, a lot of the stock isn't in. So they may have been prescribed something, but they don't have it in stock. So what does the deaf person do then? They communicate that with the chemist, the pharmacy. The pharmacy say, well, you need to go back to your GP. What do? Does the deaf person then make an appointment back with the GP? No. So a lot of it I'm doing in between work. The deaf person will contact me, I will then contact the GP will then prescribe an alternative medication, and that's working well. But I have given feedback about that because it's very frustrating, it can be very worrying to say, I haven't got this prescription, what do I do? So if there's any issues like that, do get back to me, because we're always there to help in that sense, and pretty much we can get that sorted out. But sometimes you might think as well that when there's a GP appointment, you go, why have I waited so long for an appointment, maybe 1 or 2 weeks? I went into a particular GP doctor's appointment to interpret, and I had to queue up, and they said they were redirecting patients to emergency care because there was no GP available. So that's why often they delay the appointments, because they just don't have the GPs available to serve. I did want to lastly talk about, I think I've covered all that in terms of like our service provision, but I do want to reach out to you and say that if there's anything that you ever are not sure about, or you want to reach out to and say, I've got an issue, but I don't know where to go with it, come to me. I won't have the answers, but other people that I know will, that would be able to help, and that would then generate a booking of an interpreter and an appointment. So we're always happy to help in that sense. But lastly, I just wanted to talk about the changes already about data protection. So in the past, what would happen, a deaf person would ask us to contact the bank, or contact their insurance broker, or contact the Sky TV. So we would get on the phone, and then we would be able to translate and say, I'm an interpreter, this is Mrs. Jones, she's with me now, she's deaf. What information do you need for access? They'd say, what's your date of birth? Can you speak on the phone? No, a deaf person can't speak on the phone. So, since the data protection, the law came in, which was the GDPR UK law, that came in, and literally we can't make that call anymore, because it's a national phone number. So when you phone, say for a Halifax branch, for example, Halifax Bank, you phone it goes to a national UK helpline, and it's all over Britain, and they will say to you, what's your name? What's your, they'll ask you all the security details. I can't do that anymore, because it's not my bank account, it's not my details. So that's why Sign Video came in. And Sign Video is a deaf-led organisation, and they run that in order to assist deaf people directly, breaking down those barriers of, making sure that deaf person accesses the different services. I've done a bit more research with sign video, and it's something that they're willing to come in and talk to you about, yeah. And I'm just wondering if anyone has had a positive experience from sign video. If anyone, any deaf person would be able to have a talk about, yeah? Would you be willing to have a talk about it?
It does sometimes freeze. Sometimes. I've been on it before,
Yeah.
and it's frozen sometimes.
Does Michelle want to explain about the sign video? You want?
My experience of sign video, I've used my iPad, connected to my bank. It's not the local Halifax branch, it's a national branch, it's a national service. And I've got through to try and get redirected to my local bank. And I sign my message. They have an interpreter present. Give them my name, my bank account, number, and then my private password, and connect. So maybe they're a little bit suspicious of who you are, so you just got to prove who you are. And it's worked. And it was to do with fraud. And they closed my bank account, they closed it down, but eventually it worked. Yeah, so you'll go through your national bank, and it was good. And it was quite a quick service. It was very useful for me in this instance. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know that what I'm trying to say is that I want to do my best to serve and save for faith, but that's a huge barrier. So what they've done is they've put that in place, so they have a directory of, Vodafone, if you've got an issue with your mobile. So they'll be able to explain one-to-one. But I suppose that I've given you as much as I can about our service delivery, and so I don't know if